and welcome to Can We Unschool? And we're so happy to have Robyn Robertson come today and chat with you. I know this was really anticipated, Robyn. A lot of people have questions and want to know more. So welcome and thank you for sharing. So take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me, Judy. I'm very grateful to be here. So today we're speaking about unschooling. And when I looked, it seems like I'm one of the only ones speaking specifically to unschooling in this presentation. But I'm sure that you'll find references from the other presenters as well, because I think there's a lot of connections in different parts when it's relationship and connection. I know Cynthia was talking about connection in her presentation. Golda's presentation is about, I think, planning out your home educating year. And so there's definitely, I think it all connects, and Judy does a good job of putting it together to show how it actually all connects, because I'm a believer that it's not, learning is not about the specific academic process. The foundation of learning is about the relationships and the connection. And then when we build that as our main foundation, everything grows from there, whether we are unschooling and doing self-directed learning, whether we're homeschooling or eclectic learning, however we want to, whatever we want to call it. I find that's the important part of the foundation. So we're talking about unschooling and exploring the how, what, and why of unschooling. So we can go to the next slide. Sorry, there's snow falling off my roof as I speak. So that's a bit of the crashing you might hear in the background. So welcome. So my name is Robyn Robertson. If you don't already know who I am, this is my family. We are unschoolers. My husband and I and our two kids, we have been living our unique learning journey for probably over 8 years now. And, you know, my background is actually international business, but over the years of my career, I found that I was always being drawn back to education in many different forms. So many, many years ago, I taught English overseas. I have I've been a tutor and run a tutoring business. I have created and run project-based learning classes in communities I've been in. I've served in private and public education. I've been a admissions and outreach director for a private school in Edmonton. And currently here where I live in Northern Alberta, I serve as a public school board trustee with the Peace River School Division. And I am really honored to represent my community in that role as well. So we can go to the next slide. You also may know me from my podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, or maybe not, then here's your introduction. This podcast has been present for 5 seasons now. We're in our 5th season already, and it really has been a chance for me to build a larger community, to answer questions that I had in the very beginning. And I found out that almost everyone else had the same questions that I did, to explore and learn homeschooling, unschooling, self-directed learning, alternative education, and all of the topics or issues that really support learning in the home or learning in a different environment. So whether that is parenting, relationships, brain development, or child development, all of those elements that support learning. We discuss all of that and explore that and find and listen to the unique learning journeys of different families and how they've created their learning journeys in their lives on my podcast. So if you don't already listen, you can find it on any podcast player, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, or on my website as well to listen. So we can go to the next slide. So what is unschooling? So I thought the easiest way to frame this was to give an example of share our story. When we first started, just so you know, I had no idea what unschooling was. I had never heard of the word unschooling. I didn't think it was possible, and I didn't think that anyone else was actually doing any unschooling. It was not in my life or framework whatsoever. We actually started homeschooling first, but my kids did attend school. We decided to leave school to take our kids traveling. And in order to travel, we couldn't have them in the classroom. We decided to homeschool with them because we thought it would be the easiest way to travel and be flexible in our schedule. So that's what we decided to do. And what we did when we left school, my son was in grade 1, he was 6 years old. My daughter was 3 years old, and she was attending a junior kindergarten program in the same school full time. And I was working at the school. And we left halfway through the school year, and my kids' teachers gave me all of the resources and the rest of the work that they would have to finish for the school year. And we brought that with us. And since I worked at the school, I knew the curriculum well, the program well. And I thought, well, this will be great because I have everything we need. We'll just do that. And our schedule started out where we did school in the mornings, and then we finished by lunchtime. And then after that, our lunchtime or afternoon were completely free to play, to explore, to go to the beach and do all of those kind of things. And those were our days. So what happened was I learned two big things, two big shifts happened for me during that process. The first shift was that we finished the entire school year, all of the work, within about a month. We were done everything. And I wasn't expecting that at all, just within those few hours every morning. But the second big shift that happened was that even in those spaces where there was free autonomy and learning and free play and creativity, my kids were still learning. Even when we weren't doing the school things, they were still learning. And not only that, the learning that they were doing was deep, it was meaningful, it was unstructured, it was not led by me, it was completely led by them. And it was almost like a valve, a water tap had been turned on and I couldn't shut it off. So they would go, ask questions, be curious, be exploring all day until they literally just passed out in bed at night. And really, I just did the best supporting them. They asked questions about what fish they saw today. We would try and look that up. If we could find a book on something like that, if we wanted to watch something or just ask questions, meet other people to help with that, that's what we did. And that was my job in that process. So it really was a shift for me, because I also need to explain that my idea of learning before that, and it had been shifting, but my idea of learning before that was that valuable learning really only happened. I thought learning had to be rigorous, academic, there had to be homework and testing and standards and comparison and school rankings. And all of that meant that you were a successful school or a successful learner. And to be successful, those are the things that had to come into play. So I had already started to shift my idea of that and see how other experiences could happen in learning, but really living it when we first started traveling was a big change for me when I saw my kids demonstrating such deep learning in an opposite way to what I thought valuable learning was. So that was our introduction into unschooling, really, because as we can continue to do that, and I let go a lot of the curriculum and the structure and the planning, and we fell more into open autonomy and free play and following interests and having a lot of time. And I got further and further away from school and what the classroom looked like. To be honest, I got really scared. And I thought, well, maybe I've just gone too far now. In some ways, I've always kind of been someone who is fine with pushing the limits and being different and dancing to to my own beat. But, I did start to get worried. And I thought, well, maybe I better slow down here and find out, am I the only person doing this? I can't be. What's really happening and going on? So I started to research. And I found out that we weren't the only family in the world doing this kind of learning. There are other families, and we're other families doing it and doing it quite successfully and happily. And I came to learn that there was a term that many families called it, whether it was natural learning or self-directed learning. But one of the main terminology, I think, was unschooling. And that was my introduction to it. And it just felt natural, and we continued to learn that way. So that was our introduction into unschooling. Oh, sorry, Judy, you can probably go to the next slide here. So our learning started to look more like this, exploring, being out in the world, exposure, asking questions, meeting others, and just discovery. That's what our learning as we traveled and learned. We can go to the next slide as well here. Yeah. Yes, yeah, that was, our learning started to look like that as we traveled. It was less sitting down. If we're sitting down, it was doing something like reading or painting, asking questions and having conversation. So we can go to the next slide as well. So our journey. So then what is unschooling? Because I'm talking about exploration and space and time and discovery and time to play and have autonomy. So unschooling, really, the definition, one of the definitions is learning through your own life experiences and being in control of your own learning. So it is time to explore, to build on your interests, put away curriculum, and also learning through your everyday experiences. And it's learning not because you have to, but because you want to. So you see the shift there. The shift is a learning motivation shift as well. It becomes internal as opposed to external. And it's not parent or teacher controlling the learning. It's the learner or the child controlling the learning and choosing when they want to learn, how they want to learn, and what they want to learn as well. So learning through our own life experiences and being in control of our own learning. So I think in some ways it sounds so nice, doesn't it? It sounds almost like fairy tale like and so nice and beautiful, but it doesn't sound practical at all. And for most people, it doesn't sound practical. There's work to be done, there's real life to live, there's standards to follow, there's jobs to prepare for, there's post-secondary you need to prepare to get into. So none of this actually sounds even feasible, let alone practical. So how would unschooling actually work, right? I think that's many of the questions that we get. So we can turn to the next slide. So I can talk a little bit about what unschooling is not. Because I think there's many misconceptions as well. Unschooling is not a free-for-all. I think sometimes and actually I tried to search for like a crazy picture of people just like, doing whatever and kids hanging off the rafters and just chaos and all the sort of stuff. I think that's an idea that many have about unschooling. And what I find is that unschooling is unparenting. And what I find is actually the exact opposite. It's not in parenting. Many parents are very involved and supportive of their kids, of the learning environment, and they play an important role in unschooling. So I find that most unschooling parents are the support team, they're the mentor, they're the guide, they're the facilitator as well when they need to be, but they're not the controller. And I think that's a big shift and the big adjustment for many parents that they have to make when they're looking at unschooling or considering unschooling. Because really when, most often we believe that the parents are the ultimate control and that things will not happen if we don't control and plan them. But does it really happen that way? So what I've also found for many, if you want to call it successful unschooling families, is that what happens is the parent actually, the biggest role that they play is of the quiet model. They begin to be the unschooler. And by doing that, if we, the definition that we had before, learning through our life experiences, living life, when they start doing that themselves, then they model the unschooling experience for their children as well. And they become a team, a family of unschoolers that are living the learning journey together. So I also know that if you get a chance to speak to many unschoolers, veteran unschooling families, even homeschoolers, there's a common first step that many recommend as well. And I think this actually applies whether you are unschooling or not. And the first step they usually say is, don't worry about buying curriculum right away. Don't worry about setting up your schoolroom. Don't worry about organizing your school schedule and time. The first thing to do is, and we can go to the next slide, deschooling. And if you haven't heard of the term deschooling, don't worry about it because we're going to explore that a bit right now. And if you have heard the term deschooling and maybe you're doing that right now, this might be a chance to get a little bit deeper into the process and what it is. So deschooling is stepping away from the structure that you knew before, which is usually the school-like structure, the school-like framework, the school-like scheduling, the school-like demands and way of learning, and taking the time and space to be present, to slow down, and to reflect and reframe what learning is. So we can go to the next slide, Judy. So I thought this was a great quote, and this is from Grace Llewellyn. This is a great book as a reference as well, the Teenage Liberation Handbook, and she speaks to teen unschoolers as well. And when she was referring to deschooling, she says, before you start the new way of life, you have to let the old one go. And I think that's a big important process of deschooling, because we're reframing what learning is, because unschooling is not taking the school and the classroom and the parts of it and putting it in your home. And it's also not, it's not a sneaky method to try to get your kids to do what that you want them to do. It's not just another method to try to get compliance. It's actually the opposite. It's letting go of control. It's connection over compliance is the framework. And I find when you give yourself space to deschool, to reflect about what learning really is, to observe, to watch your kids, to get to know them and their needs and what they love, their interests, and what the days may look like for them naturally, you get a better sense of how you want learning to be and how you want your home environment to be. And it's also reflecting on two key tenets or two key beliefs as well that I know everyone agrees on. No matter how you want to school, everyone agrees on this. And we can go to the next slide, Judy. And the first thing is that human beings are natural learners and that they are innately curious. I haven't found anyone who's disagreed with that. And that leads to number two. And because human beings are natural learners and innately curious, learning happens everywhere. So it's interesting that this is actually a statement that's really agreed on by pretty well everybody, but yet how we live and learn in society is quite different. I think most, if you've gone to school, believe that learning can only happen within the classroom, through curriculum, having to be taught top down with a teacher, and that learning, good learning, rigorous learning has to be externally motivated. So a learner has to be motivated by grades, by rewards and consequences, and that all of that learning, or what that goal, that carrot stick that they're going to get at the end. So it's believing that and living that is actually a pretty big difference and shift from the human beings are natural learners and innately curious, and that learning happens everywhere, that it doesn't have to happen in a specific time and space. So we can go to the next slide as well. So this is a big shift in being. And this is an important part of unschooling, because this deschooling process, it's something for the kids to be part of, but I find actually the biggest part of the process, especially if you have attended traditional schooling for all of your life as well, is that it's a shift for the parent. And if we still are the parent and are the ones who are helping to support and create this learning environment, we do need to take time to reflect on what learning means to us and why. Because a shift really does go from dictating and planning things to taking space to observe, and just to stop and watch our kids, to observe their conversation, their reactions, their interactions. It's a shift from strict scheduling to creating space and time, a shift from control to connection. So we can actually change to the next slide as well. And I'm going to check my time here too. Okay. So how do we do this? How do we deschool? How do we start making this shift? Well, one of the things with deschooling is when you take the time and space to deschool, and usually, you know, when you hear others who do that, they actually really take the time and space to play, to not try and replicate the classroom, to really just have a lot of free time. It also gives you as a parent to reflect on your beliefs around learning and why you believe it. So maybe you do believe that to be successful, you need to go to university. And that's the measure of success in learning. So a good time is to ask, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that university maybe is the only way, is the only measure of success? Was it because everyone in your family does that? Maybe someone in your family had put others down who did not do that. Maybe they hadn't done it themselves and therefore felt that everyone else needed to do that in order to be successful because they felt they weren't. It's really interesting when we do take the time and space to reflect on our beliefs and why we believe it. What happens is it gives us space to then create our own beliefs that reflect us better instead of taking someone else's beliefs. And then when we do that, we have a chance to get clear on our own values and create our own framework and values and beliefs around learning and what we believe and feel learning should look like, allowing space for our kids to talk about what they feel learning is and how it looks for them specifically, because it's an individual path for each family and each person because we are so different. Our own values and beliefs around childhood, because I truly believe that whether you're homeschooling or unschooling, how you believe children should be, with your respect towards children, your relationship with them is a big factor on what your learning environment is going to look like. And parenting, because again, it's really about relationships as well. So those are the big parts on how we do this. So again, unschooling starts many times with the parent, not necessarily always with the kids. So when we also allow time to reflect, to create space, what happens is we allow space and time to better understand our children as well and their interests. And by allowing space for interests and passions, we're also granting them confidence and security and autonomy. So when we get a bit clear on our values and our goals and where we want to go, that's always our base for our choices, the choices that we make in our learning environment. So as we give space and allow our kids a little bit more time to explore their interests, and we observe and we watch and we listen. I know that's the framework is OWL. I remember I learned that a long time ago. Observe, watch, listen. And that happens, I think, in any framework at any time in our parenting. We begin to see what they love and enjoy. We give them space to be autonomous. We begin to see that maybe the curriculum we were looking at is actually not the right fit for our child. It's maybe something we wanted, but we see maybe this certain child wants to be outside more and to explore more. And this curriculum is a lot of sit down work and a lot of work that doesn't fit with them. Or maybe our child then has the space to tell us, and we take the time to observe and watch and listen to what they say. And they say, you know what, I've been really excited about learning this Roblox game. And will you try it with me? And because you've given the space and time, you start trying out a game with your kids, and you begin to see that how the learning happens naturally around this game, and how you can create this as a support for the learning environment, as a resource supporter for the learning environment as well. And then what happens then is if you're allowing space and granting autonomy, then they actually get the chance to practice being self-directed and having the autonomy as well. When you have the space to build on your interests and passions, what also happens is you gain competence. And this is a big question in unschooling. How will they learn? They learn through natural internal motivation, building on their interests and passions, having the space to do that. And when they can deep dive, they can have the focus to gain competence and then therefore mastery. Instead of trying to cover everything in a small amount of time, they have a longer time to deep dive into specific areas and gain mastery and focus. And when you have mastery in something, the other thing that happens is confidence. And that confidence spills over into other areas of your life, other decision-making and other parts of autonomy as well. Another part that is extremely important then is the support. We can actually go to the next slide here. I almost forgot, I think that I had a next slide. So this means more free time and space for interest to explore, which gives you confidence and mastery, which then also creates opportunities for self-direction and allows you to step back more, to observe, to be that guide instead of the authoritarian, to be the support, as well as maybe the resource provider, And that helps promote autonomy and internal motivation instead of the external motivation, learning because you want to, not because you have to or someone else told you to learn. And then with the support, it's also getting to know the individual learner. When you have that time and space to create that, you get to know what your children want and what they need, and then you can better support them in that. And everyone is different. So, many say, what's the one perfect way to unschool? There is no one perfect way to unschool. The one way is to get clear on your values and beliefs, and then use that as your guide in the choices that you make, because your unschooling is going to fit the individual person, their interests and their needs. And then when that's done, you're creating greater confidence and security for your learners and for yourself and for your family as a whole. So I know this is actually 1:28. Okay, I want to also allow time for questions as well here. So we can go to the next slide. I think that's just my ending slide. I actually just put a few words that I find help in this process. And I do want to let you know that this process, I kind of covered it quickly, but it's an ongoing process. It doesn't just end within the first year. It's a process of continuous reflection and changes. But some of the things that really help in supporting unschooling, especially in the early introduction, is listening to our kids, listening to each other, observing, taking the space to observe. Play, free play is paramount in development. Conversations, so much learning happens in the conversations and in the discussions. Explorations, allowing space to ask questions and be curious and explore. That's a huge part of learning. Interests, supporting interests and passions. Exposure, another part of learning is exposure, being able to be out in community. And I know right now it's a bit difficult, but being exposed to different ideas, to different interests, to different people, and learning different mentors and learning from them as well. And trust, because when we fit all of that in, when we get clear on our values, core values and beliefs that really support ourselves and our family, trust is something that comes into play that we then begin to exercise and practice. It's like the circle, then it goes back to the confidence, security, autonomy in our shared learning as well. So I think the next slide is just, if you can go to the next slide, Judy. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm open for questions, and I would love to know what questions you have in entering your path, your forest, your journey into unschooling, or maybe this is all new to you and you're just learning about it now. But I'd said before that I know this is just laying a bit of the foundation, but the specific questions you may have, and I'm willing to answer them as well. So thank you very much, everyone. I can stop sharing my screen here. Or Judy, actually, I think you're sharing the screen.
Robyn, can you read the chat box, or would you like me to? I don't know if you can.
I can read it here.
Oh, okay. Megan says, thank you so much. I'm a stay-at-home mom and my sons are 4 and 2, and I'm considering homeschooling and schooling. Right now, I send my older son to play school a couple mornings a week so I can get a bit of a break. And there are no other programming extracurricular options right now during the pandemic. And can't do babysitting swaps with friends. My question is, do any unschoolers use a blended approach like this? The school has a very open learning environment and fits our philosophy. Just a housekeeping thing. If you don't want your question recorded, just tell us ahead of time and we'll pause the recording. Okay, so yeah. So what do you think, Robyn?
Hey, Megan, thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, really, I think that unschoolers, they do what works for their families and their individual learners. So that's going to look different for everyone, I feel. I think the biggest thing for unschooling as well is respecting the individual learner and really meeting their needs. So if this is something that works for your kids and your family together, then yeah, you can do that blended approach. I'm guessing the school, and I guess maybe just for a little bit of clarity, when you refer to the school, do you mean the play school that they're going to? Is that what you mean by that the school has a very open? Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, if it fits your values and beliefs and philosophy, then absolutely you can bring them together, blend them together. There, one of the things I do want to clarify as well is, sometimes the belief is that unschooling is free for all, that unschoolers just, they don't ever do traditional style learning. That's actually not true. That's not always the case. If the learner directs it, if the learner chooses to do that, they may be interested in something that maybe you as a parent don't know anything about, that you need a bit of support in helping to support them. Maybe if you, or maybe they feel that classes might be the best, or someone else has better knowledge, then absolutely they take classes, or they have a teacher. It's also, again, directed by the learner, not the parent planning it and saying, oh, well, here's some classes I signed you up for. It's the learner directing that. Maybe you help your child explore classes, but really that's what happens many times for unschoolers. It's finding learning in all kinds of avenues directed by the learner themselves. Okay.
Deborah has a question. If you only have one child, how do you suggest building in social interactions and activities?
Well, I know now it's a bit difficult with the pandemic. It really limits a lot of things. But, depending where you are as well, and the community around you, the same, I would, my kids have been involved in sports activities in the community, in community volunteer activities. Usually would have people over. We actually usually tried to have, whether it was in the summer or at Christmas time, and homeschoolers over for an event, whether it was like a not back to school barbecue or Christmas cookie decorations, or things like that, where we just try to bring the community to us, or create community around us, or connect with them. And sometimes that's a bit of trial and error. Sometimes in finding community, you might find some that you don't jive with, or that maybe your child doesn't necessarily connect with. And I just say, try again and keep trying until you find a fit, which I find you usually do. But it's also just like us, if we're looking for activities and things and social interactions, we go out and build them in the community as well. I live in a small community, so maybe there's not as much happening as there would be in Calgary or Edmonton, but I find that there's unschoolers and homeschoolers everywhere. And Facebook groups are a great place to connect. Usually in your area, you can put in maybe Northern Alberta. Say if I was in the north, I think if you're the central Alberta homeschoolers, or even your closest town or city, and there might be a specific Facebook group, and many times they have planned activities that they do as well that you can join and be a part of. So it's just maybe just not widely advertised. You just have to seek it out. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. And when we get a chance to open our homes, if we're comfortable doing that to support our kids and learners as well.
I felt that really helpful, especially in the teen years where, teens are awkward and don't want to make first moves and stuff. But putting up with a mess once a week on Friday afternoons, to have everyone come over and play games and stuff like that. And it was good. The parents welcomed the time they could just drop off and then go get groceries or whatever. And we all took turns bringing snack, because snack and teens go really fast.
They do.
That was one way to build community, and everybody looked, even the homeschoolers, like there were some very, very hardcore homeschoolers that kind of used Friday afternoon as get your work done or you're not going to Judy's on Friday afternoon. but
external motivation.
Kids really like that. They look forward to it all week. The other thing a few unschooling teens did was it took parent organization to get it together, but they started meeting for lunch at the mall, the local mall, or just a weekly activity where they meet, it's casual, there's no parents around. They love that. They really love that. Right. So, but, or volunteering, setting up a teen group to volunteer, because sometimes they do need an activity to focus on. They don't just like to have a cocktail party or anything like adults do. They need something to focus on where there's not eye contact at first. But yeah, there's lots of ways to building connection, or having a movie club, a discussion group, or a D&D group, or right.
Yeah. And it's also, I find sometimes it's, if your only child, it's building the connections based on their interests too. So maybe they're a big Harry Potter fan, for example, and maybe, I don't know if they've read the book and they want to have a book party or something like that. I think of one homeschooler that lives, she's probably about an hour away from us. And 1 year, and it's the same, she was really into Harry Potter, and her mom had put out, she said, my daughter would like to have this Harry Potter party for other Harry Potter fans at homeschool, who would be interested. And so I connected with her because my kids love Harry Potter. And it turned out it was just, I thought it was fantastic. My husband ended up taking both of my kids, and there was a couple of kids that they invited over to the house, and they actually, none of the kids knew each other. They were all new to each other. And she had made a whole Harry Potter, like that, like based on Hogwarts. She had broken beforehand. She'd asked everybody what house they thought they would be in, if they would be, I'm trying to remember, what is it again? I can't remember now. My mind's blanking on Gryffindor, and all of those ones. And so everyone was in their house. She had color coded it. She even made, how they drink the beer in the book. She had got these old fashioned bottles and made labels. And I think they had root beer or something like that. But she had it was amazing, the detail and extent. And it was just so cool for all of the kids. It was a shared experience. Obviously, it was her interest, but everybody that went was a Harry Potter fan as well. And they had a whole evening where she did the dinner and they played games. And I just thought it was a really cool way to connect as well. And so that's just one example, and of someone who, built that on her interest as well. So
that's great. And board game nights are very popular, and I want to say, even with a family of 5 kids, all my kids needed their own socialization groups. It's not, siblings are okay, but they fight too. And they need at least one friend, sometimes outside the family. Sometimes it's just, it's important. It's been a tough year for everybody.
Yeah, it has been. So I see, there's a hand raised, and also Delana had said she has a couple of questions as well. Delana, did you want to just did you want to just ask the questions, or?
Yes, I have a 4-year-old, and she's really playful and busy, always crafting and painting and doing all this stuff. So it's a huge mess, and I try to keep tidy, and also got a baby, so looking after that. I did want to unschool her or homeschool. I'm just doing research into that. And my question really is that she's excited to go to kindergarten, so I did enroll her. But in my mind, when things start happening, I have a backup plan and I want to do unschooling. I just wanted to ask you, Robyn, when the kids were younger and they were in school, and then you guys switched to homeschooling, was it hard for them? Did they miss school? Did they want to go back? How did you deal with that? And then
sorry, yeah.
Once you answer that, I just have one more question.
Okay. It wasn't, they didn't. Now, both of my kids actually loved the school they went to. They loved their teachers. And when we left the school, the other thing is we were traveling. So they didn't miss school at all. I was wondering if they would. They didn't. They definitely missed some of their friends because we were so far away. But I also think, and for what was happening in our time, everything at that time was such a new adventure for them. that they were so wrapped up in what they were doing in the moment, they didn't think about what was happening with their class. And we were always doing a lot of things, like we were out every day, we were exploring. At that time we were actually had moved back to Jamaica. And so we were always at the beach, we were visiting family, we were always on an adventure. Even if we were just walking around the neighborhood, we made it an adventure. So I found that they didn't talk about missing school. There was a little play school. The way they set it up with early childhood education in Jamaica, they have like play school to grade 1 there, and that's separate from the rest of school. And there was one in our neighborhood. And I just thought, maybe if they are, we would try it out and see if they wanted to go. So we contacted the school, and they actually had a day where they spent the day at the school because they both fit with the age group of the school. My daughter really liked it and she wanted to go back again. My son did not want to go back. And I actually thought it'd be the opposite. I thought he would be the one to want to continue and my daughter would be the one to stay. It wasn't the case. She said she was ready to go back again. And my son said, absolutely not. He is not. He is going to stay home. And it happened with them that because my son didn't want to go back, she decided she was going to stay with her brother. That's just what happened. But the other thing that we did as well is we stayed in contact with the kids in their class. So my son would create things and then send it to his teacher. And I don't know if she ever did show the class or not, but it was a way I think he kind of felt connected for a bit until eventually they kind of just, as at anything, we grow and they moved on to other things. And so they didn't have a big loss for school at all, actually, in that way. Their days were filled with other things. And they also were so far away from school that it wasn't like it was close or anything like that as well. So.
Well, that kind of answers my second question because I live in the far north, like Robyn. I was hoping that I could send her to kindergarten to get all that artsy stuff kind of supplemented. So I'm not always the one doing it with her, just to let her do it with friends and the teacher. And then my thoughts were to get her in school, she can do that stuff. And then when it comes point in time where she either loses interest or the teachers start saying you have to do all this homework at home and you have to read this book and so we're spending too many hours a day with school, that's when I was going to have a talk with her and just see, hey, do you want to just stay at home and we'll learn here, but also use the school as a place for sports and fun. Sorry, my baby just fell.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you take, yeah, you absolutely can do that. Absolutely. The thing is you're also the parent. I think we forget this as well, right? It's actually our choice of what we want to do. So if you, I mean this in the way that if you decide that she is going to school for that year and then you want to try a year out, you absolutely, I'm trying to say how to tactfully put this. You'll probably get pressure, of course, right, to stay in school full time. But as a parent, it's your choice what you want, how you want to do that. So if you want to take it and try it for a year, you absolutely can do that. And then take it year by year or month by month and see how you want to go from that as well.
Great. That's what I was thinking to do. So, and I was learning about like unschooling school. So I was kind of like, once it gets too much pressure and they're like, your kid can't read to age level and you need to do this, this, and this, then I wanted to do a little bit of pushback and helping her learn herself and guide her own ways. So thank you, Robyn.
Yeah, anytime. And where we are, we have a great facilitator for the home education program who can also help parents how to voice their needs and requirements as well. And you can be part of some of those like field trips or sports or things like that that are offered in the school community too. And we've worked hard to have that happen for homeschoolers locally as well. So you absolutely do have the option of still being part of the community. I understand we live in the far north, so the school becomes very much the community hub where a lot of activities come out from there. So it's nice to still be able to connect and be able to access those activities. So And Megan had her hand up as well before.
Hi, Megan. Did you?
Hello, there we go.
There you go.
There's my audio. Hi, thanks for asking my question earlier. I have two quick ones. One, how do you respond? Because I've been thinking about this for a while, and family members, not in my own family, but external family members would be quite critical. So how do you respond gracefully to some pretty heavy criticism when you start to unschool, and questions not coming from a place of understanding, but from a place of like, well, what about this? What about that? Yeah, and then I'll get to my other question after.
Okay. Yeah, what I found over time is I usually respond to questions or criticism with a question myself. I ask them. So, usually it's, how do you want to give me a criticism?
Oh,
Something
well, like socially, what's going to happen to them socially? They'll be by themselves all the time. That's a big one. And then also, our school system is flawed. Yes, but like, how is it going to fix it if everybody leaves? Those were the big ones.
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes you can ask, well, what does socialization mean for you? What do you feel is important for kids to do in order for them to be okay socially or to socialize? And maybe they'll give some examples. Like maybe they might say, well, they need to be with other kids their age. Okay, well, we can still create that within our community and home. There's other unschoolers or homeschoolers, and they still get a chance to be with kids their age. And this also comes with, I know, time and learning and experience as well. There are resources because usually there's one idea, but we just believe that this is the case. But there usually is a lot of information and data supporting. For example, it's important for kids to be with various ages. When you have mentors, they're not always going to be the same age. When they have the experience and the understanding of dealing with people properly, things like bullying or social pressure, how to deal with that. I know usually we get our answers from our other peers or same age, and where did they hear that information? I can think of the crazy things my friends told me when I asked them first, and how off the mark it really was, and how we sometimes can be guided by that without having the chance to actually have an open, honest conversation with an adult or with our parents and those things. So usually I ask where they're getting the information from, and also what their big concern is. If it's someone that's really close, maybe there is a certain fear that they have that they haven't expressed, and by asking questions of them, what are they really concerned about? Have they had personal experience? What do they know about it, or what's their experience of it? Then might give you a better idea of how to respond and what to tell them. Sometimes people just want to talk and be heard out.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just, okay, well, thanks for letting me know how you feel. I understand that now. We're just really following what we feel right now our family needs. And we're just taking it day by day and year by year. But now I appreciate your understanding. So, and at some point they can only say
drop it.
Long.
Yeah, fair enough. Awesome. My other question is, maybe it's because I'm in the thick of it right now with a 4 and a 2-year-old, having some kind of side hustle in terms of like to make a little extra money. And I'm fully committed to being a stay-at-home mom, and I love it. But eventually, I would like to do something, a little extra on the side, maybe. Do a lot of unschoolers do that? Does that get a little easier as they get older, or harder because they need you more to sort of point them in the right direction for resources for whatever they're wanting to learn?
I would say probably half and half. I do know a lot of unschooling parents that run a business at home or do have a side hustle, that do other things for sure. Does it get easier as they get older? Yes, it does, because I think as they become, as they grow and develop, they become, and also when you're supporting independence and autonomy, they become more independent and autonomous. Right. So, it starts to go from supporting them maybe more hands-on to them sitting beside you and doing their thing while you do your thing, for sure. So I know I work
You work, yeah.
I do. My kids are older, but they're pretty independent, but I also still get help from my family, from my in-laws when I need, and other friends as well. I know Judy has worked as well with her while her kids unschooled. There's a lot of parents that I do know that work while they homeschool or unschool.
And that is another thing that appeals to me about it, is the flexibility of it, while still getting to be with my kids and do things with my kids and learn alongside them, but still, have a little extra something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's also part of the unschooling process when I talked about being a model. When our kids see us go into ventures and have to learn things from the beginning, have to struggle, make mistakes, and then still find joy in the process, that's a huge advantage. That's a huge part of learning that you model. And then they can see how it plays out in real life. Like, that's still real life happening right there.
Yep, that's true. Awesome, thank you. And I can hear my son with my husband downstairs saying, "Mommy, come down." So,
Thanks for the questions.
Hi, Robyn. We have some more comments in the chat box. So Deborah. Deborah said, my son initially missed school despite not enjoying it. He seemed to think that he needed to be there. But once he started, he realized the fun he was having at home, even with lessons, the need faded. The need for school faded. Yeah. Shauna said a comment, my son was the same, missed his friends more than anything, but once we made homeschool friends, it was no problem at all. Now he says he always wants to homeschool, even in these isolating times. Right?
Hi, Shauna. I know Shauna, yeah.
And then Deborah says, I got that you're going to ruin his future from my husband's family. I asked them what they felt he needed to be successful. It was an interesting conversation. Yeah.
I think also a great thing as well, and what I've found, honestly, a lot of people just don't know. They don't know about homeschooling even, let alone unschooling. And unschooling is even more of an unknown. So when I find that when I've got into conversation of, well, don't you think that, how are they going to go to university if they don't do these things? How are they going to be a successful adult? How are they going to have the skills to do things? And when I ask more, they just don't know because it's so different from what they know. And their experience, they don't have any experience on how it works. And it's great to meet others who have done that and have the experience and shown how it works. It gives you as a parent great support, but also others a great idea of how, what that looks like and how it can turn out essentially as well. So
yeah. I have a question for you. If parents are interviewing the school boards for fall and stuff, what would be good questions to ask if they want to see how supportive they are for unschooling?
Well, first, I would just ask, do you support unschooling? And or even what do you believe unschooling is? They also may say, yeah, we support unschooling, but in order to do that, they might not know what it actually looks like. They may just think it's homeschooling. So I would ask those questions, or just, what do you believe homeschool or unschoolers need, or how do you support unschoolers? Have you had unschoolers registered with your board in the past? And what did that look like for you? And how did you support them? I think those would be important questions. If they've already had unschoolers, then they would have a good idea of how to best support unschoolers. If it's something new, do they know what it is? And this is just from also personal experience. What I've found for many educators, and I think of the criticisms and the questions, I think I've gotten quite a few from educators themselves. And what I've found in the end is that they just don't really know what it is. And so the criticisms and questions come from a space of not knowing. So, one educator just took probably half an hour to, what if, they're not going to get a job, there's all this sort of stuff. They went through all of the big things. And in the end, it came down to they had their specific training and master's degree in distance learning. So what they thought what it meant to them was online learning. That's what it was. And they didn't have any concept of the world around outside of just distance learning, online learning. They didn't know that there was a functioning community outside of that as well. And when I've got the chance to speak with many times with other educators, it's been more of a, oh, wow, I didn't know that we actually did do this in Alberta. I didn't know homeschoolers were supported this way in Alberta. Oh, I didn't know that you have a chance to actually opt out of using the curriculum and just following the outcomes. I didn't know that Alberta education provided outcomes. So much of it has been, I just didn't know. And some have said to me, well, I didn't even know it could be successful until we started meeting families like yours, because I've only met others who've, struggled or had these problems. And that was my introduction to them. I'm just learning the world outside of it. So sometimes it's just not knowing.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because you would think, teachers, they go to school for 4 years. You'd think they would get a little, just a little smidgen of, oh, well, there are self-directed learners out there. But they're steeped in classroom learning. That's what they're taught, classroom learning.
It's part of the learning process in post-secondary. It's the ideal. The intrinsic motivation is the ideal that you want for your learner. It's kind of like the holy grail, I think, in some ways. And you read about it and learn about it, but to actually hear the success of how it works, it's really difficult to do within school and within the framework of school. And I think just like many of us sometimes that end up homeschooling and start out by replicating school at home, you learned all these things, but once you actually get into the classroom, you fall back on what you've always known and what you always do. And usually that is not autonomous learning or self-directed learning. And it's kind of like, how do you support a self-directed learner in a space where it is top down and there is no space for anyone, even staff members, to be self-directed? So how could your own students be self-directed when you, as a worker, an employee, you've never experienced that yourself? So it's kind of that, you're chasing the tail, but, you're actually never really getting anywhere, because you're not able to provide the environment for intrinsic motivation, self-direction. And we know the big parts of the environment of that is the competency, having the free space to learn and to deep dive, and the time to do that, and to be competent and master, having autonomy, actually practicing autonomy, making choices and decisions. And if they're not the right choices and decisions, that's okay. Trying again and making those mistakes and not being penalized and punished for making mistakes and not following others and making very different mistakes. It's okay. Accepting the internal motivation. There's a big thing of saying, okay, you have the choice, but when you make the choice and being like, oh, that wasn't a very good choice, still accepting the internal motivation is a big thing for the confidence and the security you need in order to experience that and try it out to make the mistakes. And then the relationship, the relatedness, which then that all comes together again, is if you want to be autonomous, you have to have that supportive relationship where you feel secure to make your own decisions and make choices or make mistakes in those choices as well. And when you have timed classes, exams, marks, pressure, applications for then post-secondary, and you have to be ranked and honor roll, AP classes, certain levels, -1, -2, how you were coded, colors of the school rankings, all that sort of stuff does not represent any of that relatedness, autonomy, competent, like mastery within that realm. So.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. Good. Okay. Anybody else? Any last minute questions? You can just unmute if you want.
Everybody else is good. We answered every single question that you have. Really? Wow. I actually thought there was going to be questions about learning to read or math or anything like that is actually what I thought there, or even, curriculum, but.
So we're doing another Unschooling Divas on Sunday, May 16th, I think. We're gonna dissect the math debate on direct teaching versus discovery, because that will be interesting.
Yes,
So
Sunday,
yes.
the 16th at 1:00. It's Judy and Golda and I, the Unschooling Divas, that hold a free Zoom session on, unschooling and math. This is our theme for May. Shauna's going to be there. Awesome. Good.
Yay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, no more questions. All right.
Well, thank you,
everyone.
Robyn. Thank you so much for donating your part of your afternoon to us. And this was very valuable. So every time I listen to you, I love the way you present things. It's very, in a new way, it comes home to me. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom and experience. And I love your pictures. They're amazing.
Thank you. Thanks. I just pulled them out of my photo album, or else make them on my slides. And I'm trying to find the right picture. So if anybody has it, please let me know, of like the idea of what the wild free unschooler is, how people think it's just this crazy free for all that, but I couldn't find the right picture. So the detail on the May session is the question. So we will post the Zoom link. I don't think we've created the Zoom link yet, but if you are, Deborah, are you on Alberta Homeschoolers or Alberta Unschoolers, or either Judy's email list or my email list at all, or either of our social media? Because we will post the information on there when we get closer to the date. We'll start posting it in May, the link to sign up, and then the information for registration about Alberta Homeschoolers so far. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You'll see it then for sure. Or follow Robyn, follow me. You'll get it somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you want pictures of chaos, I have a few. You should see what my house looked like some days. Or the mess or things like that. But now my house is super clean. So
yeah, because I'm sure it's just the three of you now. Yeah. And now actually I'm down to one child as well, because my son went away on his learning adventure. He's gone for a few months too. So I just have my daughter. So I'm very happy for him, but I miss having him around for sure, but he's learning in the wilderness right now, but it's definitely an adjustment. So yeah, and the house is, even with one less person, is a lot quieter and not as messy, but
groceries last longer.
Yeah, a lot longer. It's actually amazing. Yeah.
Shauna said her middle covered himself in glitter yesterday. Would have been an ideal photo. Oh yes, those are moments before you yell that you should take the picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you probably in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, everyone, and maybe we'll see everyone then as well on our Zoom Unschooling Zoom Q&A too.
And don't forget to follow Robyn in her podcast. It's amazing. She's got so many interviews up there with, she just did one with Heather, who is proposing the Calgary Self-Directed Learning Center. So you'll find out more about that there. So go see what Robyn has for you. There's tons of podcasts, lots of information, tons of inspiration there.
Yeah, Judy's been on there as well twice. We've talked about math and unschooling as well. And yeah, there is a ton. We're getting close to our 100th episode. So there's a lot of information. So thank you so much, Judy. Thanks for having me. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the day and the beginning of their year as well. So.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.